It was a morning drenched in chaos, the kind that rips you from sleep with a jolt you can't shake. I'd barely stumbled onto my porch, coffee sloshing in a chipped mug, when the sky split open. A jagged bolt of lightning tore through the gray, illuminating Maplewood Lane in a flicker of electric fury. Thunder followed, a guttural roar that rattled the windows and sent my spoon clattering into my cereal bowl. I cursed under my breath, thinking the storm would be the worst of it. Then I saw it, a neon orange envelope plastered to my mailbox, flapping like a warning flag in the wind. No name, no return address, just my address in blocky black ink and a $500 fine tucked inside, citing violation of HOA Ordinance 14.7b, unauthorized lawn art. The culprit? My 6-inch garden gnome, Reggie, a flea market find with a chipped blue hat and a fishing pole, standing guard by my marigolds. I laughed at first, a sharp, disbelieving bark. Then the absurdity sank in, and with it, a slow burn of rage. I'd moved to this pastel prison of a neighborhood for quiet, not to be policed by some clipboard-wielding lunatic over a gnome. That's when I decided, if they wanted a war over lawn art, I'd give them a masterpiece they'd choke on. Maplewood Lane was a postcard rows of cookie-cutter houses, manicured lawns edged with military precision, mailboxes all painted the same shade of taupe. It screamed serenity, but beneath the surface, the HOA ran this place like a fiefdom, and Margaret Hensley was its tyrant queen. She was a wiry woman with a perm frozen in the 80s and eyes that could spot a blade of grass out of line from a block away. To her, individuality was a crime, and she'd find people for everything from slightly crooked shutters to a Christmas wreath lingering past January 6th. I'd come here, a remote data analyst named Clara Bennett, craving peace after years of city noise. All I wanted was to sip my coffee, tend my flowers, and let Reggie keep his silent watch. Instead, I'd landed in a suburban dystopia where a gnome was grounds for a shakedown. The fine hit me like a slap, but it was the principle that stung. I stormed to the HOA office that afternoon, the orange envelope crumpled in my fist, rain still dripping from my hair. Margaret sat behind a desk that looked like it belonged in a dollhouse, all fake wood and polished brass, smirking as I barged in. "Clara, dear," she drawled, twirling a pen between her manicured fingers. "We have standards here. That little creature on your lawn? It's an eyesore. And frankly, it's a beacon for pest rats, squirrels, who knows what else." Her voice was syrupy, but her eyes glinted with malice. I tried to argue Reggie wasn't hurting anyone, but she cut me off. "Rules are rules. This isn't some bohemian free-for-all. Pay the fine, remove the gnome, or we'll escalate." I left her office fuming, half tempted to chuck Reggie through her window just to see that smug face crack. That night, I called my oldest friend, Tessa Reyes, a welder with a penchant for turning scrap metal into art and a laugh that could wake the dead. I recounted the saga over speakerphone, pacing my kitchen while thunder rumbled outside. When I joked about building a giant middle finger to the HOA, Tessa went quiet, then said, "Why stop there? Let's make it personal. A 12-foot Margaret Hensley, mid-scowl, immortalized in steel. Put it right on your lawn." I froze, then grinned. It was insane, brilliant, and just spiteful enough to work. But if I was doing this, it had to be airtight legal, unassailable, a thumb in Margaret's as she couldn't pry out. I spent the next 2 nights hunched over my laptop, coffee going cold as I dissected the HOA charter. It was a labyrinth of petty regulations, fence heights, paint codes, even a ban on excessive bird feeders. Then, buried in the fine print, I found it. Clause 6.4, temporary art installations. Structures not affixed to the property could stand for up to 90 days, subject only to review, no pre-approval required. It was a loophole wide enough to drive a forklift through, and I intended to do just that. Tessa sketched the design the next day. A towering Margaret, clipboard clutched like a scepter, her signature scowl etched in fiberglass, her windbreaker emblazoned with Maplewood Patrol. We dubbed it the Overseer, and as we laughed over the plans, I felt something shift. This wasn't just revenge, it was a rebellion. Word spread fast. Neighbors eyed barely spoken to started showing up at my door. Old Mr. Jenkins, who'd been fined for a non-regulation mailbox, dropped off a rusted bike frame. Lila Carter, a widow with a wild streak, brought a box of wire hangers and a story about Margaret finding her for a wind chime. Even young Tommy Reese, barely out of high school, hauled over a dented car hood his dad didn't need. They'd all been burned by Margaret's rain fines for porch lights left on too late, citations for kids, chalk drawings on driveways. It wasn't just my fight anymore, it was ours. I played dumb in public, nodding meekly when Margaret waved from her pristine yard, smug as ever. She thought I'd folded. She had no idea what was coming. Tessa set up shop in her garage, welding the frame while I molded fiberglass in mine. We worked late, fueled by pizza and spite, the air thick with sparks and the tang of sealant. I nearly lost Margaret's head down my basement stairs one night, catching it just before it smashed. Tessa added a motion sensor that barked "violation detected" in a robotic drawl whenever someone got close. "Museum grade," she said, grinning. "Her lawn's the gallery," I shot back. The logistics were a nightmare securing a flatbed, borrowing a forklift from Tessa's cousin, but we pulled it off. At 5:30 a.m., on installation day, a dozen neighbors gathered in the pre-dawn gloom, breath fogging in the chill. Tommy rigged a tricycle wheel to the base for mobility. Lila dabbed paint on Margaret's pursed lips, and Jenkins handed me a thermos of coffee with a wink. At 5:55, the flatbed rolled in. By 6:10, the overseer stood tall, tarp yanked away as the sun broke the horizon, casting her shadow across Margaret's perfect hedge. The reaction was instant. "Mrs. Delaney from 2 doors down choked on her tea and laughed so hard she dropped her mug. Paul Grayson, the neighborhood's resident filmmaker, caught it all on his phone, scoring it to Sweet Caroline for kicks. A crowd formed, chairs dragged out, kids snapping selfies, someone blasting Eye of the Tiger. At 6:50, Margaret's silver sedan screeched to a halt. She stepped out, still in her bathrobe, coffee cup trembling in her hand as she stared up at her 12-foot doppelganger. Her scream was primal, a sound that could have shattered glass, drowned out only by the sensors, violation detected. The crowd erupted. "Think this is funny?" she spat, jabbing a finger at me. I sipped my coffee, calm as stone. "Temporary art. Margaret, check your bylaws." She stormed off, already dialing her lawyer. By noon, the overseer was viral. Reddit threads exploded with Eleanor Colossus. Mema Sumion photoshopped her scowling over the Statue of Liberty. A local news van parked on my curb, the reporter barely stifling a grin as she interviewed me. My lawn became a festival ground. Folding chairs, coolers, a kid selling lemonade for $1. That night, my security cam caught Margaret sneaking back, hooded and wielding a crowbar. She swung at the statue's base violation detected and tripped over her own feet, scrambling into the dark. I taped the footage to her mailbox the next morning with a note. "Unauthorized maintenance, 2:03 a.m. See you in court." She hit back hardest cease and desist letter claiming distress and defamation, followed by an emergency HOA meeting. She pushed for a 3-foot height limit on displays, but the board, half of whom secretly hated her, shot it down, cackling as they cited her own bylaws. Then my mailbox vanished, ripped from its post. The cam caught her dragging it down the street, muttering curses. Reddit went wild again. Mailbox mayhem trended, spawning t-shirt designs overnight. She sued me for emotional trauma. I countersued for tampering and harassment, dragging in every fine she'd ever issued as evidence of HOA fraud. My lawyer, an old college buddy named Jake Voss, turned it into a bloodbath. The courtroom was packed, Judge Marwood presiding like a weary king. Margaret ranted about hostile art. Jake dismantled her case, proving her presidency had lapsed months ago due to an unrenewed term. Her fines were void, her suit collapsed, and an audit was ordered. The crowd cheered as she fled, 3 board members resigning in her wake. Paul Grayson took over the HOA, rewriting the bylaws to let Maplewood breathe. The city bought the overseer for a park, plopping a plaque beneath it, in honor of Reggie, guardian of freedom. Margaret sold her house and vanished, Last seen griping at a gas station 2 towns over. My lawn's quiet now. Reggie's back by the marigolds, chipped hat and all. I sip my coffee each morning, watching the squirrels, and smile. Peace, at last. One with a 12-foot middle finger to tyranny. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.